Hi, welcome to 5 Minute Bible, where I do my very best to give you biblical truths in 5 minutes or less. Short scripture lessons for your busy life. You know, how does God speak to me is a huge issue in the church. A lot of people are asking, well, how do I know if I'm hearing God? How do I know if it is God? And over the next several weeks, I'm going to be talking about this topic using biblical characters. I don't even like to use the word characters because they were real living historical people. So let's say biblical people as examples of the way that God speaks to us, reasons we might not be hearing from God, and those types of things. So the big one, whenever this conversation is, if you ask a person, how do you hear from God? Have you heard from God? Their answer always is, well, I've never heard him speak out loud, but ... And, it's interesting that we all equate that somehow hearing God's audible voice somehow means that we're spiritual or religious, or that's the expectation that we could have. But in truth, while God has spoken to people that way from scriptural evidence, that is not the main way he speaks, especially now. The Old Testament, the Spirit worked differently. So there was perhaps more common practice of hearing the Lord in an audible way. But in the New Testament, it's actually pretty rare to hear the Lord speak to you audibly. And the one New Testament example that I want to give, of course, is Saul, who later became Paul. Saul's conversion. Now, a quick history on Saul. He was a very religious Jew. Taught in the things of Judaism, very religious, and he was even present at the stoning of Stephen, who was a Christian deacon, and really one of the first big signs of persecution of the church was when Stephen was stoned. And Saul was there holding people's coats while they did it. He was 100% on board with this terrible death that Stephen had. And by the way, Stephen's example in it, awesome, go read that. But in Acts 8 and 9, we have the story of Paul's conversion. He had actually gone to the church and asked for letters to be able to go and arrest people and persecute people for being Christians. And on the way to Damascus, he hears an audible voice. Saul, why are you persecuting me? And then he literally falls to the ground and is struck blind. Wow, that is like a huge, that is like a supernatural experience with God that Paul had. But we really have to examine this for a minute, because it seems everybody in the church wants a Paul experience. But when you look at Paul and the others who have had Paul experiences, you see that, yes, you have this massive, miraculous, supernatural moment with God, but they always come out of the worst circumstances. My husband likes to say that if God's speaking to you audibly, it's because you haven't listened to any other things that he was saying. And the same certainly could be said of Paul. Paul was trained and educated in the church. He was on that career path, So he knew the scriptures that talked about the Messiah. The word was right there. And yet he didn't believe it. He knew the reports of other Christians, other people who'd had encounters with Jesus, who said he was the Messiah, but he didn't listen to them. And he was hell-bent on getting these Christians for spreading falsehoods. So his heart was incredibly hard. So for the Lord to communicate to him, he totally had to knock him on his back and blind him and speak to him from the sky to get his attention. So we all want these experiences, but we shouldn't want these experiences. An average Christian living an average life should never have to have a Paul experience, because they're listening to God all the other ways. In modern times, this Paul experiences that I hear about come from, say, people lost in addiction, and they need to be grabbed and shaken by God. Or people who are in countries where Christianity is completely oppressed and there's no other way to communicate. So the first thing I want to say about how does God talk to you is don't feel like the ultimate proof of your relationship is a Paul moment, because Paul moments only come out of bad times. Instead, be open to and listen to the quiet ways that God is talking to you.